With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories: St. Kitts and Nevis modernizes banking laws to enhance financial security and trust. Government passes special sustainability zone authorization bill. Conch shell reefs boost marine life in St. Kitts and Nevis. Venezuela files rejoiner in border case. Jamaica Prime Minister to announce election date soon. Internationally, Ukraine's borders must not be changed by force, European Union leaders say. Now, the details. The National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis passed pivotal amendments to its Banking Act on August 11, 2025, significantly bolstering the regulatory capabilities of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB. These legislative updates are designed to fortify protection for depositors and borrowers and to ensure the overall stability and fairness of the financial sector across the region. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew, who moved the Banking Amendment Bill 2025, highlighted the collaborative effort behind the changes.
These changes are a result of thorough collective processes. The ECCB's legal and supervisory teams developed the proposals. They were discussed with our ministries of finance and other stakeholders, and critically, the ECCU Monetary Council agreed on them before this bill came to our Parliament. This bill is therefore the product of broad consultation and regional consensus.
The amendment introduces a comprehensive framework empowering the ECCB with modern tools to oversee financial institutions more effectively. Key reforms include updating definitions to align with contemporary banking practices, enabling banks to offer new services under strict oversight, and tightening rules for license revocation. The amendment also brings currency exchange operations under ECCB regulation, strengthens controls on profit distribution and related party lending, and regulates outsourcing and property leasing arrangements. Dr. Drew emphasized the customer-centric nature of these amendments.
For the everyday man and woman, this means easier access to fair financial services, better protection for savings, and more trust that the bank you choose will treat you right.
He further explained the specifics, including a ban on shell banks and risky relationships with them, enhanced risk-based supervision, and the power for the ECCB
to cap excessive fees. Madam Speaker, establishes a framework for fair treatment of customers. So this is customer-friendly.
In addition to the Banking Amendment Bill 2025, the National Assembly also debated and passed the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Cooperation Agreement Amendment Bill 2025. Prime Minister Drew explained the targeted nature of this amendment.
What we seek here is to make sure that protection is covered on all fronts, are guaranteed on all fronts. This bill changes that in a targeted way. It will amend Section 5A so that two specific parts of the Banking Act will now apply to ECAMC. These provisions set out the rules for winding up a bank, how a receiver is appointed, how assets are managed, and how the process is completed. Madam Speaker, by applying Part 10 to ECAMC, it ensures that if ECAMC ever needs to be wound up itself, there's a clear, tested, and regionally consistent process in law, Madam Speaker. Let us look at Section 178. Now, the secrecy of information. This section requires directors, officers, and employees of a bank to keep customer information confidential, Madam Speaker. Very important, except in certain permitted circumstances. But confidentiality in the banking sector is extremely important. People don't want to have the money in a bank and other people talking about, how much you got there because the information was leaked. But applying this rule to ECAMC strengthens the legal protection of sensitive information it handles when managing distressed assets, reassuring the public that privacy is safeguarded.
Minister of Infrastructure et al., the Honourable Conrad Maynard, echoed the importance of the amendment for systemic stability.
So on the surface, Madam Speaker, it may seem to be a very simple amendment, but it addresses, an important matter for stability and clarity of our financial system.
He underscored that this targeted application ensures the ECAMC operates within a robust regulatory environment while acknowledging its unique mandate.
The ECAMC is really no ordinary institution. It was created by our Eastern Caribbean Currency Union through a multilateral agreement to deal with one of the most challenging issues that any banking sector can face. That is the problem of distressed or non-performing assets. These are loans and other assets that, if left unresolved, can erode bank balance sheets, they can threaten depositors' confidence, and they can weaken the stability of the entire financial sector. So the ECAMC's job is really to step in and perhaps even acquire these troubled assets from financial institutions, manage them professionally, and work to recover value over time. Now, in doing so, it relieves our banks and our credit unions of a heavy burden and allows them to refocus on what their core mission is, of course, which is serving customers, providing credit, and driving economic growth.
This bill clarifies the application of specific sections of the Banking Act to the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation, ECAMC, particularly concerning winding up procedures and information confidentiality. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis has enacted a pivotal piece of legislation, the Special Sustainability Zone Authorization Bill 2025, on August 11, 2025, marking a significant stride toward sustainable economic transformation. The bill is designed to attract high-quality foreign direct investment, diversify the national economy, and create long-term job opportunities, all while safeguarding the Federation's environment and sovereignty. Prime Minister the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew, who led the debate, emphasized the bill's critical role in the nation's future.
This bill gives our country a practical tool to attract foreign direct investment and create long-term job opportunities while protecting our environment. It is a framework for doing big projects the right way.
He further elaborated on the foundational principles.
This bill is historic, Madam Speaker, and this is, of course, in keeping, as I said before, with our Sustainable Island State agenda, because it is the first piece of legislation to weave all 7 pillars directly into a law. It says in black and white that any special sustainability zone must advance multiple pillars, so our development strengthens people and planet together.
Dr. Drew highlighted the need for economic diversification beyond the current mainstays.
We need new engines, clean energy, resilient housing, agri-tech, health and education services, green manufacturing, logistics and technology.
Leader of the Opposition and Premier of Nevis, the Honourable Mark Brantley, voiced his strong support for the bill, echoing the sentiment for economic diversification. Brantley stressed the urgency of moving away from heavy reliance on the Citizenship by Investment (CBI) program.
I believe that the signs are clear all around us that the Citizenship by Investment goose that has laid the golden eggs for us for the past 2 decades, that there are some serious headwinds, Madam Speaker, involving that particular sector.
He praised the innovative approach.
St. Kitts and Nevis is, as always, I want to emphasize that, St. Kitts and Nevis is, as always, stepping out ahead of the region. Whether it was CBI, way back in 1984, we not only stepped out ahead of the region, we stepped out ahead of the world, because we gave the world that idea. We are now again looking to innovate by saying, here's an idea that has worked elsewhere, but has not yet been put into practice and into effect in the English-speaking Caribbean to the extent that it can drive economic development and economic diversification in a way that we need it to do here in our country.
He concluded by emphasizing the robust safeguards within the bill.
What I like about this structure is that it tells you that at every step of the way there are safeguards. I think the language used by the move was guardrails. But guardrails, safeguards, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They are the necessary safeguards to ensure oversight, to ensure that if a zone is declared on St. Kitts, naturally the government of the day would have those safeguards in place and that oversight. And similarly, in Nevis, the government of the day would have those safeguards and oversight. It also, in the structure of the bill, requires that matters concerning these zones, governance, development agreements, that they come to the Parliament. Now that is a quantum leap forward.
The legislation is the first in the nation's history to directly integrate the 7 pillars of the Sustainable Island State Agenda: water security, energy transition, food security, sustainable industry, sustainable settlements, circular economy, and social protection into law. St. Kitts and Nevis is witnessing a significant positive impact on its marine biodiversity through the innovative use of conch shell artificial reefs. Introduced via the Coast Fish Project, these reefs are meticulously designed to create crucial habitats, particularly for lobsters, and are fostering a more sustainable marine ecosystem. The initiative underscores a strong commitment to marine conservation and co-management efforts between local communities and the Department of Marine Resources. Vaughn Sturge, Marine Resource Assistant for the St. Kitts and Nevis Department of Marine Resources, detailed the construction and deployment process of these impactful reefs.
Basically what we are doing, we have the steel cages that are filled with the conch shells and the blocks to create a marine habitat for lobsters. We deploy the cages, we put the cinder blocks at the bottom where we create a space for the lobsters to hide, and then we fill the cages with conch shells. At the top of the artificial reef, we install an artificial seaweed which captures the post-larvae of the lobsters. From there, they will venture down into the conch shells where they will find shelter and food. And from there, they will venture off to nearby reefs to help repopulate the stock of lobsters. So, to the community of St. Kitts and Nevis, we ask that you support the fishers in helping us with these artificial reefs.
This comprehensive approach not only provides shelter but also supports the early life stages of lobsters, contributing to their wider dispersal and population growth. The success of the Coast Fish Project is a testament to strong collaborative efforts and international support. Director Randall Thompson expressed gratitude.
We want to thank the people of Japan, JICA, ICNet for their support in making the Coast Fish Project a reality. The Department of Marine Resources is committed to seeing the government's Sustainable Island State Agenda come to life by improving marine habitat and also by implementing sustainable fishing practices.
This project exemplifies a shared vision for a sustainable island state, emphasizing both habitat improvement and responsible fishing practices for long-term marine health. In regional news, Venezuela files rejoinder in border case, News Source Guyana reports.
Venezuela has filed its rejoinder in the 1899 arbitral award case, in which the government of Guyana has asked the International Court to uphold the validity of the award that sets the boundaries between Guyana and Venezuela. Guyana was notified of Venezuela's submission by the ICJ, with the court explaining that it was done within the time limit fixed by the court in its June 14, 2024 order. In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guyana said Guyana welcomes the submission by Venezuela. The ministry said Guyana welcomes the filing of the rejoinder by Venezuela, which ensures that the court will have before it all the factual and legal arguments of both parties when it issues its final judgment, rendering it fully authoritative and incontestable. It explained that the rejoinder is in response to Guyana's reply, which was filed in December of last year and constitutes the final written pleading in the case. The Foreign Affairs Ministry said in accordance with its standard procedures, the court, upon returning from its summer recess, will schedule oral hearings on the merits of the case, to be followed by its deliberations and the issuance of its final judgment, which will be binding on the parties under international law. Throughout its arguments before the court, Guyana has maintained that the 1899 arbitral award is valid and ought to be respected by Venezuela. Guyana has repeatedly pointed out that Venezuela, for more than 60 years, accepted the award, and it was not until the eve of Guyana's independence in 1966 that a Spanish-speaking country rejected the award in its attempt to lay claim to 2/3 of Guyana's territory in the Essequibo region. However, Venezuela on 2 occasions sought to have the case dismissed by the International Court, filing 2 separate objections. Those objections, however, were rejected. The foreign ministry said Guyana remains steadfastly committed to the peaceful resolution of the controversy in accordance with international law by the International Court of Justice, the world's highest and most respected judicial authority.
Jamaica Prime Minister to announce election date soon. Television Jamaica has the details.
The country is bracing for what is expected to be a general election date announcement by Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness on Sunday. TVJ News sat down with General Secretaries of the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party. Here's Jamila Maitland with that report.
It's a strong possibility that we bring the whole party organized to Hertfordshire, and Sunday would give it, certainly indicate the date. But I can't give the date, I don't know where it is. It's his privilege, so even if I'm here, I would breach it.
General Secretary of the Jamaica Labour Party, Dr. Horace Chang, on the JLP mass meeting scheduled for Hertfordshire Square in St. Andrew on Sunday, August 10. Dr. Chang, during an exclusive interview with TVJ's On the Campaign Trail, could only say a major announcement is expected to be made.
I expect the Prime Minister, the date for election, the Prime Minister has preserved. And he has a certain limit within the Constitution. He will going to accept that limit in the Constitution. So I still couldn't say the date because he's holding that to his chest. That's his privilege. So even if he announces on Sunday, I can't say the date where it will be.
Do you think the element of surprise is lost now? Because as government, you know, you retain that ability to call the election, and now with the time.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with the government having the flexibility, but we try to serve a full term. Because one of the challenges you face when we are going forward to the country with an achievement performance program, and you have to give yourself time to achieve enough of the visibility to become, you know.
Under the law, the Prime Minister has the discretion to call the election within 5 years. Within this time, the Prime Minister can dissolve the Parliament and advise the Governor-General about the election date. The Prime Minister can also stay the full 5 years because Parliament automatically dissolves 5 years after the first parliamentary sitting after winning the election. That was on September 15, 2020. Over the years, however, Prime Ministers have usually stayed within that period. However, the law gives the Prime Minister up to 3 months after the first date of the parliamentary sitting to call the election. That could take us up to December. General Secretary of the People's National Party, Dr. Dayton Campbell, says it's unlikely that he'd go that far.
I don't think so. As much as the Minister of Constitutional Legal Affairs was provocative in her remarks, I don't believe so. I think it would send the wrong signal for the government. It's already sending the wrong signal, the fact that they haven't been able to call the elections already. Because when you have the final decision about calling it, you look for a window that is beneficial to you. So the fact that they have not called it suggests that they have not seen a window that is beneficial to them. So I think to go beyond the time period now, I think that would cause us to win more seats than we'd be winning today if they were to do that.
According to Dr. Chang, the election could have been long before if it hadn't been for COVID-19 and to a lesser extent, Hurricane Beryl.
If we had implemented the 2020 budget read by Nigel Clark, we would have maybe called the election already. Because a lot of the things we are doing now would have been executed early on. Right after they did the budget, COVID hit us, and that knocked away 3 fiscal years.
Either way, Dr. Campbell says it gives the PNP more time to prepare.
The longer this campaign has gone on, the better it has gotten for us in terms of our organization. And I believe if it goes to September, it will get better.
As for the public,
what are you waiting on? What are you waiting on? If you call it now, it's over. If you call it a morning, it's over. And if you don't call it, it's over same way.
There's not so much new bus Andrew bring on the road for me. There's not so much nice bus. I can plug in on my phone. I charge and plug in on my bus. Plug in on the phone in the bus and the side of the inner AC. So I'm not fit in a bus and a coaster bus and drop in a bottle. The whole back hurt, you feel pain. And that's why I rate him. Because a good Prime Minister of Jamaica, you understand? Yeah, AC in the bus, them have all first aid kit up there. So.
Jamila Maitland, TVJ News.
We now bring you these international reports.
European leaders have warned against Ukrainian borders being redrawn by force 2 days before a US-Russia summit on Ukraine is due to take place in Alaska. In a statement, European leaders, excluding Hungary, said the people of Ukraine must have the freedom to decide their future adding that the principles of territorial integrity must be respected and international borders must not be changed by force. Well, President Zelensky, who's not been invited to the summit on Friday, posted a warning today that Russia is playing for time. The Russian army is not preparing to end the war. On the contrary, he said, they are making movements that indicate preparations for a new offensive operation. Well, in a BBC interview, the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said any peace deal for Ukraine that didn't involve that country simply wouldn't be implemented.
Well, it's clear that Putin just wants to talk to President Trump and go for the old-fashioned way of, let's divide the territories and spheres of influence. But it's clear that it doesn't work that way because Ukraine has been very clear, Europe has been very clear that we can't agree to anything that Ukraine doesn't agree to. So if Ukraine is not of the deal, any deal will just not be implemented. And that is the reason why Ukraine needs to be around that table.
You've got another meeting Wednesday with Donald Trump, with Volodymyr Zelensky. You want to be consulted on what goes forward. What are you going to say to him? What are you going to ask for?
Well, we have also leaders level statements coming out. We had the discussion on the foreign ministers level today. We were very united in, of course, wanting peace, also unconditional ceasefire for any negotiations to start. And then also that the concessions need to be made on the Russian side, who hasn't done any concessions whatsoever. I just remind you that Ukraine agreed to unconditional ceasefire 5 months ago, and Russia is just stalling. Russia just wants to postpone the secondary sanctions, that the risk was up there. President Trump was saying that if Putin is not, making any steps, then he will put the sanctions on Russia. So he wants to postpone that, and he wants to show that he's around the table like equal and others are not. But it's just that any deal to function, I repeat again, needs Ukraine's consent, because otherwise it just doesn't work.
Let's talk to our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. Frank, a really clear position there from Kaja Kallas. What is not clear is how much of that Donald Trump believes.
He gives the appearance of changing his mind from 1 month to the next. I mean, he was very clear back in February that he was putting all the blame on President Zelensky. And remember that he hasn't sanctioned Russia so far at all. All the pressure initially was on Ukraine. Then, after that disastrous low of the Oval Office meeting and on February the 28th, when he told, do you remember, he gave a huge dressing down to Zelensky, saying you haven't got all the cards, etc. They then patched things up a bit in the Vatican, and then subsequently he started to appear to blame President Putin, saying he's stringing me along or tapping me along and so on. It's very hard to see which way it's going to go, but this summit, assuming it is going to go ahead, and there's no reason to think it won't, this is already a victory for President Trump in the sense that President Putin, because he is breaking out of the isolation that Europe has tried very hard to put him in, slapping sanctions on him, round after round of EU sanctions. Now there is the possibility of those sanctions on the US side being lifted, of possible trade deals between the US and Russia, and of course the real possibility that Ukraine could be sidelined in all of this.
Well, let's pick up on that final point, because we heard from the German Chancellor yesterday he was going to make sure that Zelensky participated in this Trump-Putin meeting. Unclear exactly how, but how significant do you think it is that the Europeans are trying, even at this late stage, to ensure there's no sort of sellout of Ukraine?
The analogy I think I would give, Matthew, it's like a train that has left the station. And on that train, you've got Trump and Putin, and the Europeans and Ukraine are left on the platform saying, hang on, wait, we're not on the train. Stop. It's a bit like that. They are, I think, not entirely relevant to the White House's plans here. Certainly Putin, it suits him to have Europe and Ukraine cut out of this. And Putin is a smart guy. He may be wrong on some things, but he is a smart guy. He spent his early years in intelligence as a KGB officer. He went on to head Russian intelligence. He's been a consummate political maneuverist. And to some extent, I think, he's possibly going to there's a risk he's going to outsmart Trump on this.
Yes, and even Donald Trump has acknowledged in the past, in recent weeks, that perhaps he is being played by Vladimir Putin. And talk us through it, because Donald Trump at the White House talking about land swaps. Just explain to people watching the sort of things that are being talked about. We also hear about freezing the front lines. We talk about perhaps there may be no official recognition that it is Russian territory if that's the place we end up with these negotiations. So,
or the front lines of, in a large scale like this, they've hardly budged since late 2022. So Crimea, it took in 2014, it occupied it and then illegally annexed it. So what this summit is about is trying to reach some kind of some kind of agreement that possibly kicks down the road the idea of sovereignty. Because for Ukraine, this is a red line. They cannot give up sovereignty to areas that thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have given their lives for to defend. That would be political suicide for President Zelensky, potentially. But Crimea, I think even some Ukrainians know Russia's never going to give Crimea back. All Russians consider Crimea is absolutely part of their lifeblood.
And really briefly, in terms of what Ukraine may get back or hope to get back, it will be what continued long-term diplomatic pressure, even sanctions to try to sort out those territorial areas that you just referenced, and also some sort of security guarantee, perhaps the pathway to NATO membership.
Yeah, the downsides, I think, of this summit are probably much bigger for Ukraine than they are for Russia. Russia isn't risking very much by having this summit. I think the most likely resolution is that there will be some talk of freezing the front line. Now, the question is, where do you freeze it? There is quite a lot of talk of Ukraine having to give up the parts of Donetsk Oblast, Donetsk province, that's in the Donbass, that it still occupies, or not occupies, it's Ukrainian land. The parts that it still is present in and is defending, giving that up to Russia. In return, there would be a ceasefire, there would be an end to the nightly bombardments of Ukrainian cities by Russian drones and missiles, and potentially Russia would have to give up some parts of the other two oblasts, Kherson and Zaporizhia. But it's not clear yet exactly what is on the table. None of this is going to have any lasting peace effect unless there are security guarantees. If they're written on paper, it means nothing. The big European message to President Trump is do not trust President Putin, because you've got to remember that just in the days running up to the full-scale invasion 3.5 years ago, Russia was telling the world, we're not going to invade. This is just Western propaganda and hyperbole. Then they invaded.
There have been protests across Europe and in the United States over the targeted killing of 5 journalists in Gaza on Sunday. The Israelis hit a media tent outside the main gate of the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City, killing the Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif, along with 4 colleagues. The British government has called for an independent investigation. The UN called the attack a grave breach of international law. The 5 journalists had worked extensively across Gaza, documenting the death and destruction. They were killed ahead of expected offensives that will further expand the Israeli military operations across the Gaza Strip. Well, let's speak to Sarah Deroux, who's head of protection at Frontline Defenders, part of the Journalists in Distress Network, which helps journalists globally. And thank you so much for being here on the programme. How alarmed have you been by what actually happened on Sunday?
Thank you, Matthew, so much for inviting us for this conversation. I think the events on last Sunday are part of a pattern and a trend that we have seen unfolding since October 2023 in the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, the killing of Anas al-Sharif, but also Mohammed Kraika are another one of killings of 2 human rights defenders who are also journalists, working, as you mentioned, on documenting violations and a genocidal campaign ongoing in the Gaza Strip.
And do you think it is targeted killings?
Certainly, there is enough evidence to believe those killings were targeted. First, by the threats expressed by the spokesperson of the IDF a few days ago, which had certainly put a target on Anas' back, and Anas was clearly speaking on that. He knew he was being targeted, he knew he was being threatened, and he published a letter mentioning it. The pattern that we have seen of targeting of human rights defenders, journalists, and their families, for example, in the case of Anas, he not only his family was killed just a few months ago, his father was killed on his family house, but also in the case of Muhammad, who was killed just a few meters away from where his mother was executed last year by IDF, along with other Palestinian nationals in front of the Al-Sharifa hospital. So looking at the region, the specific place where they were killed, the fact that the tent was a known tent for journalists, the fact that there were previous threats against Anas, the fact that their family members have been previously targeted adds on to a clear pattern of direct targeting of the two of them because of their work.
Yes, I mentioned in the introduction what the UN has said about it. Tell me and remind viewers what protections do journalists have under international law?
So journalists enjoy protection by the international human rights law and also by international humanitarian law. In this particular case, the two of them as journalists were human rights defenders. That means they are protected by the UN Declaration of Human Rights Defenders that protect the right to protect rights. So it means they have the right to promote human rights and they have the right to hold and to seek information on human rights. They are also protected by the Geneva Convention, so the international humanitarian law. So their Article 79 under the Geneva Convention from 1949, which protects civilians. And in this context, the two of them, specifically Mohammed and Anas, I'm speaking on the two of them, but of course the 5 journalists in this context were protected as civilians caught in a hostage.
Yes, you will have seen what the Israelis have said about Anas al-Sharif and the documentation.
Hostile conflict environment.
Sorry, it slightly froze the line to you, so I hope you're still with me. Let me ask you another question, because you will have seen what the Israelis have said about Anas al-Sharif and the documentation that they have shown. In terms of accountability, if the Israeli claims don't stack up, would there be a case against the person that ordered the killing, the person that carried out the killing?
So we have seen in previous killings so far a consistent pattern both of impunity. I'm just going to mention one well-known case, Shirin Abu Akleh, who was killed, a journalist from Al Jazeera, who was killed while doing her work. Her case was never brought to justice. There have been a number of communications, both from the ICJ and from ICC, different decisions in which they have condemned the pattern and the practice of labeling journalists as terrorists, such as in this case. So what are we seeing is both a pattern of labeling as terrorists, but also a pattern of impunity when targeting journalists doing their work in that context. So, of course, there is a case, but there is already previous resolutions, communications from different UN bodies, communications from different international courts. So there is a need also for more concrete action from different states to ensure the international laws to which they also bind the two. So by that, I'm not only talking about international humanitarian law, but also the international human rights law. So both Israel, but also all the other member states need to be accountable and engage on making sure those legislations are secure,
Yes.
and the human rights defenders can enjoy the right to defend rights in that context.
U.S. consumer prices rose moderately in July, and a key measure of underlying inflation increased slightly more than expected. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI report, released Tuesday from the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics, showed prices rose 0.2% last month, in line with economists' expectations. That put the annual inflation rate at 2.7%. But core CPI, which strips out food and energy prices, rose to its highest level in 6 months, bringing the annual rate to 3.1%, above forecasts. That was partly due to price hikes on tariff-sensitive goods like household furniture. Economists also cautioned that prices would continue to rise from President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, with one telling Reuters that most goods on store shelves arrived months ago before tariffs were implemented, and that those on their way have yet to have additional duties levied. But Tuesday's CPI report did not change market expectations that the Federal Reserve would cut interest rates in September amid signs of a weakening labor market. Meanwhile, concerns are mounting over the quality of U.S. inflation and employment reports following federal budget and staffing cuts that have resulted in the suspension of data collection for portions of the CPI. Those worries were amplified by Trump's firing of Erica McIntarfer, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, after July's weak non-farm payrolls report. Trump on Monday nominated Heritage Foundation economist E.J. Antoni, a critic of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to head the agency. Antoni was a contributor to Project 2025, the controversial conservative plan to overhaul the federal government.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: St. Kitts and Nevis modernizes banking laws to enhance financial security and trust. Government passes special sustainability zone authorization bill. Conch shell reefs boost marine life in St. Kitts and Nevis. Venezuela files rejoiner in border case. Jamaica Prime Minister to announce election date soon. Internationally, Ukraine's borders must not be changed by force, European Union leaders say. Thank you for listening.